In Genesis 1:1, the Bible introduces us to the first characteristic of God, and that's the character of the Creator. Yesterday we talked to James Brandon, the plant-based success coach, and that interview is on the 15-minute perspectives playlist on YouTube. So please go there and subscribe, check it out. But today we're going back to talking about God and creativity. Today we're talking to Jordan Foster, a concept artist and illustrator. Right now he's doing his master's at the Academy of Art. He's about to graduate soon, so he's about to be out in these streets, drawing everything. And we're going to talk to Jordan about God and how his creativity reveals God to him. Hi, Jordan. Can you hear me?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
All I could do. Go ahead.
You can finish.
Okay.
I think it's just a lag. That's all.
Okay. So I've been wondering, like, since the first God that we're introduced to in the Bible is the Creator, I've always wondered about the connection between God and creativity. So how, being an artist, has God been revealed to you through your creativity?
Mm-hmm. So when I read the Bible, and I see in Genesis chapters 1 and 2 that God's creating the entire earth, you know, he's creating the water and the animals and humans and all these different things. The biggest thing that I see is that he has this simple joy for just creating. It's almost inexplicable. And so when I'm drawing, when I'm creating, that joy is something that always stays with me. Even on those days where I'm frustrated with what with what I'm working on, or maybe I'm not as excited about it as a personal project, maybe there's still something that always draws me back to it. And I remember even last semester, there were times where I literally got no sleep because I had so much work to do.
Yeah.
And you would think, I'm sick of drawing. I'm so sick of working on this thing. I just need a break. That wouldn't be me. I would, take an hour off and I'd be like, all right, let's get, and there's something kind of intrinsic in us that that humans have a desire to just make things. The other thing that I think is pretty exciting is when I'm creating my own work, I basically get to make my own rules. Of course, there are things like anatomy and perspective and all the little Art 101 rules, but really, there really are no limitations. The only limitations you have is your own imagination. And even, a 2-year-old can just go out, give them a box of crayons, they can just go for it. And they have so much fun doing that. So just that joy of creating, making up your own rules, and then being able to pour out your heart into everything that you do is something that is unparalleled in my experience. Like, I can't think of anything else that I find more joy in other than just making things.
So you would say that it's almost a reflection of the character of God in that you get to be the creator on that piece of paper.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, there's a quote from a painter named Bob Ross. Most people know him. He's become like a meme now, but he would always say, on the canvas, you're your own creator. Create your own world. No one tells you what to do. You get to, make your own thing. And that's kind of how it is for me. And whenever I'm making something, if I go like, I don't want that, I want him to be taller, and I just make him taller just because I feel like it. And obviously humans are much more complex than drawings, but something about that connection to God, being able to experience the act of creating is something that I think that he wanted for us to experience. Even when he put Adam and Eve in the garden, his goal was not to have them just be doing nothing. It was to, cultivate the soil and the plants and, and populate the earth, So it's something that we have a desire to do that's within us. And for me, I found that my route to be just by the pencil.
Yeah. So I find it interesting. It's almost as if humanity all has a need to create, whether you do it by the pencil, people do it with music, people do it with you know, work and entrepreneurship, people do it through different ways, and your way is just the original, well, not the original way, but through the pen, with the pen.
Right. You know, and I think and I like the point that you brought up about there being a lot of different avenues for creativity to come out, because even Paul says that you know, there are many members but they're all the same body, you know. So you have some people who are more skilled at this, like me. I'm not much of a singer. I like to sing, but I don't sing very well. You know, there's some people who are musicians, some people who are writers, artists. It's all over the place, and I think we all, you know, really appreciate the different things that people contribute to God's creation, essentially.
So you talked about this before, but in your experience, being a Christian and an artist, like sometimes in church, it's like you're going to be a pastor, a doctor, and art isn't always one of the things that, you know, we're pushed to be. How has church impacted your artistry?
Well, that's a tricky question. Well, part of it is I always keep that mindset of God as a creative being. You know, He wants people to make things, and I think it's kind of silly to think that every single person in the church has to go into one of these 2 or 3 categories. Not everyone's fit for that. I mean, even Peter, he was a fisherman. He was cool being a fisherman, and he met Jesus. Paul, even while he was preaching, was a tent maker. That was his job. He worked with his hands. And, you know, while he got money of it, I'm sure there's something about it that he enjoyed. Jesus himself was a carpenter, you know, and I always thought that was kind of amusing. God, even when he came in the flesh, his occupation was something that was creative, working with his hands. So there are people who I've experienced in church who are not as inspired by the arts, or they don't see the purpose for it or the need for it. But I think that's, I just kind of ignore it, because really everything in life has to be designed. On that I'm speaking through, these headphones, the furniture on the bed, like all these things have to be thought of. And for someone to think that doing art is not important, or that it's not part of God's plan or God's will for our lives, I think it's just silly. You could fight me on that, but that's just how I feel.
Cool. Well, what have you learned through art that would benefit others, and how do you think this your art could be harnessed for ministry?
Well, one thing about art that I think benefits others is it actually expands your mind. I think it helps you to understand the way that God thinks. So, for example, as an artist, I have to study human anatomy. You know, I have to understand how arms work, how legs work, things like that. And the more you study, you start to see the design in each thing that God has created. There's something really interesting I found out even about insects. There's something called the golden ratio, and basically what that is, it's supposed to be like this perfect mathematical equation to get a perfect composition and a paint of that and place it over like a beetle. You'll find that it's the exact same ratio. Like even God is using that same thing in a lot of the things that's created. And so realizing that there's just an infinite what's the word, number of possibilities and resources that we can look at, where we could see that God is using these artistic principles. How can it be used for ministry? I think that God created the world to be attractive. I was reading in the book Steps to Christ, and it was saying that if you notice the way that God initially planned the earth, you know, being covered in grass and nature and everything, green is the most restful color to the eye.
Yeah.
And he could have easily just said, let's make everything dirt brown.
Mhm.
You know, he could have done that if he wanted to, or he could have made like fuchsia or like a cyan blue, and all those things probably wouldn't have been as appealing as the green. So there's a purpose for everything.
Yeah.
And using it for ministry, I think if we use those same ideas about how do we draw people to God using these visuals, I think that it can lead a lot of people to the church, and a lot of people to the Bible, and a lot of people to understand who God really is and what his character is.
Yeah. I think it's also how do we visually draw people to God? Oh man. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So, and I love that you talked about the unity of what did you call it? The golden
ratio.
The golden ratio, the unity of the golden ratio. I think that you know, that unity is found differently in different occupations. So like if you're a chef, you might find that unity in food. If you're a tent maker, you might find, well, I don't think God made tents, but yeah, you know what I mean, in different occupations. So what would you say to someone young in church who's drawing and they're thinking about being an artist?
I would say to keep going. There's this whole concept of a starving artist, and oh no, will you ever make any money? That pretty much doesn't even exist anymore. There's so many avenues and so many resources for people to make money using the art that's not an excuse anymore. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if God put this desire in your heart and it's not inherently a bad thing, then I don't see why you should feel the need to reject it, because a lot of people are called to do a lot of different things. Not everyone's called to preach. Not everyone's called to be a minister or an evangelist going around all over the world. Now, I do believe we're supposed to, to minister in the sense that, treat others as Christ would treat them, and, be kind and considerate and, help other, those things. But as far as, a job and everything, I think kids should definitely support their own passions and ideas for being artists, and parents especially. I notice tend to have this idea that that art means you have to be this super liberal, person, and that might take you away from the church in some strange way. I've heard it before. I don't mean to be offensive. That's a very serious concern, and I just think that if you follow your passion and you follow what God's calling you to do, regardless if it's art or if it's ministry or if it's being a chef, whatever, you can find a way to minister to God's people in the world by using that talent. And God's going to put that in you, that what you are supposed to say. Just like how he said the Holy Spirit will tell you what to say in a moment of trial, he's going to put that idea in your mind for you to create something that will draw people to him.
I love what you said. You said that maybe we're not all called to preach. And what if we are? But we're just not all called to preach from our pulpit. Maybe we're called to preach with the pencil or whatever you artists use now. Maybe we're all called to preach in the way that we're called to express ourselves. And I'm glad that you chosen to express yourself through art. Man, I don't know why my book is out of my arm's reach right now, but man, when we met, right? We met in Connecticut. Man, we were doing some so we were doing this some exercise in church, and we were partnered with each other, and we had to learn about each other. So I learned that Jordan was an artist. So I said I had to introduce him and say what I learned about him. So I said this is Jordan. He's my new friend. He's an artist, and he's going to illustrate my first book. And he did. I didn't even know I was gonna write a book. I don't know why I said that. But I also, man, I'm fascinated by your art,
I remember
man.
that clear as day, man.
I'm fascinated by your art
so much. I appreciate that.
and I love that. Like initially evangelism. Well, one of the early evangelists. They were a group of traveling artists, and they would depict the gospel through art and talk about their art. And now I always think about that when I think of you, man. Maybe if I say it will come true like my book.
That's awesome. Speaking into existence, man.
Yeah, exactly. You got to. So you guys can find Jordan on Instagram at joe.mc.fo. That's joe.mc.fo. And you can find his portfolio on there. He does great work. He illustrated my book. He illustrated a whole bunch of other stuff for me, and we're working on some other things for the future. So check out Jordan. Thanks for listening. Jordan, thanks for talking. It's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.